Hello guys, this is your friend. We are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto build own harem with Tsunami, Tsunade, Mikoto, Ayame, Anko, Karin, Hana, Temari, Tsume, Tsuyu, Shizune, Kin, Hinata, and Kurenai, Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start a new fanfic. Naruto was silently resting on the couch at Tsunade's house, in the dead of the night. He had his own room because Tsunade had his own room, Tsunami and Sakura were sharing a room, Inari had his own room, and Kakashi and Sasuke were sharing a room. It was just after the battle for the bridge. In fact, a huge party would be thrown tomorrow. He was resting until a large book appeared out of nowhere and dropped, right on his groin. Son of a bitch. Naruto shouted, rolling onto the floor and smacking his head into it by accident. Whoever said that having a second pain dulls the first was a moron. In his pain-ridden mind, Naruto had a few thoughts. One of the least was, why isn't anyone coming down? Thinking it to be a prank pulled by that Inari kid, Naruto slowly sat up and picked the rather heavy book up. By the log, this thing weighs a good 20 pounds. Is there a way to make it smaller? As soon as Naruto said those words, the book shrank in his hand, which made him blink. It was now the size of a paperback novel. It was even addressed to him, strangely enough. On the front in big bold letters were the words, "To Naruto Uzumaki, read me." Naruto looked the book over, turning it looking for a summary or a title of the book, but it didn't have anything past that writing. I hate reading, Naruto said, but opened the front page where words began to write themselves. To Naruto Uzumaki, if you are reading this, then my aim was true and you have been stuck in a video game. If you're not Naruto Uzumaki, then you should be reduced to ash by the end of this sentence. Naruto, I have placed you within a video game of my own design that, hopefully, doesn't have any glitches. There will be a few inconsistencies that you know of, but everyone else will think of as natural. The point of this video game is simple. Level up and become the strongest ninja known. However, unlike normal video games, you won't be leveling up through combat and learning multiple jutsu. Instead, you'll be leveling up by having with various women and learning jutsu that will help you have with the women. What? Naruto shouted before looking around. Sakura wouldn't like it if he would be doing this. At this point you have lively shouted and are wondering where your precious Sakura-chan is, in case she heard your shouts. The second the book hit the targeted owner, it cast a quick silencing seal around you so that you can hear yourself, but no one else can until you are finished reading. It also boosted your libido or drive so that you will notice other women. A flat-chested howler monkey fan girl won't even level you up if you were at level 1, which you're not. Turn the page. Bossy book. Naruto said, turning the page and then recoiling his hand as he got a rather deep paper cut, but he finished turning the page. On the left-hand page was writing, and on the right-hand side was a bunch of stats. He started to read. Yes, and by the extent of me the book, am bossy. Deal with it. I know all, see all, and hear all. So learn some manners before I change what the Kyuubi gave you between your legs to the size of a cashew. Naruto whimpered, putting one hand between his legs. While he wasn't sure if he was big or not, he knew a cashew was not. Now that that's cleared up, welcome to the stats page. Strength, speed, intelligence, endurance, acrobatics, chakra levels, chakra control, and luck. These are all numerical values that pertain to you. If we were to put your chakra levels on, say, Kakashi's scale, then the numbers would be much higher, or lower, depending on the circumstances. Strength is the physical strength of your body, the higher it is the harder you hit. Speed is the physical speed of your body, the higher it is the faster you move. Intelligence isn't how much stuff you know, but rather how well you use what you know. Make sure to learn more as your intelligence gets higher, or else you'll be sorely limited. Endurance is how long your strength and speed last. Low strength but high endurance means you can win against someone with high strength but low endurance. Endurance is also how long you can go in the bed, even having multiple orgasms. Acrobatics is how high you can jump, how much you can bend, and a whole slew of other things. Chakra levels are blatantly obvious. However, as you also increase your intelligence, your chakra levels will go up some as well. Having a biju stuck inside your gut, however, your chakra levels are already damned impressive. Chakra control is again blatantly obvious. Luck affects everything. From how well you gamble, to what will show up on missions, luck will also slightly deal with how women handle you. If the woman is a frigid bitch, then a high luck might warm her up to you. Every level, you will get 5 stat points outside of the 10 you start with. You can also increase these stats by learning and training. Naruto looked to the stats. Strength was at a 25. He guessed that was good, but he wasn't sure what the numbers were out of. Speed was at a 30, intelligence was at 10, endurance was a solid 40, acrobatics was at 20, chakra levels was at 40, and he wasn't surprised to see his chakra control at 15. Luck was at 25. The limits of all the stats are at 200. You can train your stats, to an extent, and boost them. Every level, however, you can boost a stat up 5 points. The higher the level, the longer it will take to level up. Turn the page. Naruto kept a snide comment to himself and turned the page where there was a list of skills. These are your skills, kid. Kunai throwing, shuriken throwing, trap making, etc. Some of the skills are going to be. My recommendation is to boost your aura skill up when you get the chance. How many points you get for these are determined by your intelligence. As of right now, you get your intelligence x1, plus the level you're currently at. There are enough stats to keep you going for a very long time. The cap on each skill is 200. Turn the page. Naruto turned the page, and then turned another, seeing the next page was a list of even more skills. There had to be at least 200 skills. The new page had him, chibified, standing on top of a blue bar with a 0 at one end and a 1 at the other. Welcome to your progress page, kid. This is how far you are into the level. Certain actions will fill this bar. Having, and learning jutsu that can help you in are great ways to fill this bar. Now, let's see. Naruto stared at the words on the page as the bar emptied. Don't worry, kid. I just reset it so you can see what achievements you've gotten so far to see what they do. Naruto stared as above the bar the words, congratulations. You passed the academy. You are now legally an adult and can have plus 100 points. The words faded and the points sank down to the bar where the bar automatically filled up. Naruto tapped the little golden arrow under the bar and he felt a jolt of empowerment as the pages flipped back to the stats page. He looked at the page. He had 15 points to spend. He chose to put 5 points to his strength, and then the next 7 all on his intelligence, having a feeling he'd need it. The remaining 3 went to chakra control. He was then flipped to the skills page where he looked at how many points he had to spend. He was level 1 now, which meant he got 1 extra point on top of the 17 points. So he had 18 points to spend. He saw the aura skill the book talked about and tapped it. Aura is how desirable you are found by other women. Naruto noticed it already at 15, which in his opinion wasn't bad. The higher the skill, the more a woman wants you. Kunoichi will need a higher level for you to do things with them. Naruto thought on all the book had told him. If he needed to have, then he'd need to be more appealing. If he was more appealing, he'd have more. If he had more, he'd level up more. Without a second thought, he poured all 18 points into it. 20 PTS. Now civilian women are more likely to find you desirable and willing to have with you if you play the right moves. 30 PTS. Now civilian women are even more likely to try and have with you. Naruto nodded before going back to the page that had the level bar. New words were formed. Made the jutsu. You can now have lesbian. Plus 150 points. The points floated down to the bar, and filled it. He noticed a bank option for the points and tapped it as more words showed up. Shadow clone jutsu mastered. You can now have gang bangs and or threesomes in MORESOMES. Plus 300 points. Naruto watched as the bar filled up again and he tapped the bank option to allow his points to be banked. He then flipped over to his stats page. He now had 10 points to work with. He put 3 into his intelligence, rounding it out to 20. 2 went to the chakra control, rounding that out to 20 as well. The remaining 5 points headed straight to luck, boosting it to 30. Heading to the skills page, he noticed he had 45 points to work with. He scratched his chin a bit, trying to figure out how he wanted to play with this. He decided to boost his aura up to 50 points. Aura, 50 PTS. Apprentice level, civilian women will find themselves incredibly horny around your presence, friendly kunoichi are willing to have with you. Naruto then glanced at his genjutsu, his worst possible skill, which was at 0. He poured the 25 points into it. Genjutsu, 25 PTS. You can now detect AC rank genjutsu, and dispel AD rank genjutsu. Naruto went back to the level progress page but didn't find any new words that would fill the bar the rest of the way. Guess I haven't done anything else noteworthy yet, he said before he flipped the next page. Welcome to the perks page. Perks are gained every other level, and can be a variety of things. Certain requirements must be met before a perk can be taken. Even Kekkei Genkai are perks, though they almost always have requirements to be met before they can be taken. Turn the page. Naruto glanced at some of the perks as he turned the page. The one called Rinnegan caught his eye, but he ignored it. He did however see the Hyoten unlocked. He tapped it. Hyoten. Requirements, defeat Haku. Allows for use of the Hyoten Kekkei Genkai. Naruto rolled his eyes at the obvious description. He pondered it for a second before tapping the yes icon. He had already used his one skill point. Naruto then flipped the page. This is essentially your bingo book of women. While you do not have to have with each and every one of the women in the bingo book, it has all the possible women you can have with. You will notice a few of them are meant to be dead. And by rights, they should be, however I saw fit to resurrect them from my game. Also, the Biju are in here. You won't be able to see their human forms in here until you have with them. Now, good luck out there, good hunting, and be careful. Naruto rolled his eyes at the last thing the book said. You make it sound like I won't treat the women with respect. Naruto scratched his chin as he looked through the pages of women. Kurenai was in there, Hinata was in there, a woman by the name of Tsunade was in there. He stopped at a name that he knew was of someone who by rights should be dead, Mikoto Uchiha, mother of Sasuke and Itachi Uchiha. He knew Itachi had slaughtered all of the Uchiha clan, including Mikoto, however something was off. This must be one of those inconsistency things, he said as he looked through a few more pages, seeing that it also told Naruto the allegiance of the women. Single quote. He randomly, out of curiosity, tapped the Ikibi no Tanuki. Ikibi no Tanuki, allegiance, herself. Bust. Unknown. Hips. Unknown. Height. Unknown. Weight. Unknown. Requirements to get with. Destroy the Shukaku spirit possessing the Ikibi, fix the seal on Subaku no Gara, release the Ikibi no Tanuki without killing Subaku no Gara. Naruto blinked his eyes staring. That is a lot of stuff to do, Naruto said in a bit of awe. Naruto snapped the book shut as he heard someone walk down. He saw the book change to a random novel. He stood and went over to see who had walked down. He stopped at the kitchen and stared for a bit. Tsunami had walked down in a robe that did little to hide the fact she had a nice taut body even after having given birth. Naruto swallowed as he watched her bend into the fridge and gather some things for a midnight snack. Her round just stuck out there almost having a heart shape to it. Naruto could feel his swelling underneath the orange jumpsuit. Are you alright Tsunami-san? Naruto asked politely as he moved over to her. Oh Naruto-kun, Tsunami said jumping a little bit and placing her hand on her rather ample. You startled me, I didn't think anyone else would be up at this time. Naruto shrugged. I couldn't sleep and decided to do a bit of reading. My teammates would likely try to insult me if I told them I liked reading. Tsunami looked over at Naruto and felt a warmth travel down along her spine to the core of her body, a warmth she hadn't felt since Kaiza. She hoped he didn't notice as her thighs rubbed together, trying to ease the warmth. Where did this come from? Was it because the blonde in front of her reminded her so much of Kaiza? That the blonde also saved her family and her home. She was eyeing him like a prime rib steak and she had been starved for years. I'm sorry to hear that, Naruto-kun. Her voice came out a little throatier than she had intended. With his newfound intelligence, and his libido now unleashed, Naruto picked up on little things. He noticed as her hand fell away from her, that her finger lingered a bit to slide along her hard which he could see the outline of. He noticed her thighs rub together, even with her being discreet about it. He noticed a slight blush dusting her cheeks and he heard the throatier octave as she spoke. Naruto gave her his best foxy smile and he watched as the blush darkened. Thanks, Tsunami-san. He then noticed her look dejected for a bit before faking a smile. What's wrong, Tsunami-san? You're much too pretty to be sad. Naruto said. Oh, it's nothing, Naruto-kun. Tsunami said, her body getting hotter from the full force of that foxy smile. By Kami, she wanted this boy, no, this man in front of her. But being called Tsunami-san reminded her that she was much older than he was. He wouldn't want a woman like her, a woman who had a child. Tell me, Tsunami-san, Naruto said, stepping a bit closer, almost having her brush against his chest. She was so flustered that it was rather interesting to watch. Tsunami almost stepped back as Naruto stepped closer, but her body didn't want to. Hell, her mind didn't want to. I was just hoping you'd call me Tsunami-chan. Tsunami said, not knowing what came over her. Naruto gave her a big grin, not quite his foxy grin. Alright, Tsunami-chan, Gigi has been getting on me about learning manners, so I didn't want to seem rude. Naruto said. Tsunami blushed some more. She had to have him. Well, Naruto-kun, I don't mean to be rude, I mean you helped our village and my family so much, but could you perhaps help me with something? She asked, licking her full lips. Please let her be asking what I hope she is. Naruto thought but gave her a grin. Sure. I don't mind helping out. If I'm going to be Hokage someday, I can't back down from a challenge. Tsunami set the fixings for her midnight snack on the counter before moving over to Naruto. He leaned into him a bit, her pressed around his arm as she leaned right into his ear. I need you, Naruto-kun. She whispered in a husky tone as she cupped his groin, getting even hornier at what she felt between his legs. It certainly wasn't a kunai, but it was as hard as one. It's been years since I've last felt like a woman, and judging by what's in my hand, I bet you see me as a woman, don't you? Tsunami asked with a small pout to her lips. Naruto's virgin mind was blown as he felt Tsunami rubbing his. Why yes ma'am, Tsunami-chan. Naruto stuttered out in his half-there state of mind as she rubbed his arm against her. His mind was further blown as Tsunami took a small step back and undid her robe, letting it drop, revealing her rather toned body. Not toned from training, just hard work around the house. Her while big and full had little sag to them, just from gravity. His eyes feasted over her form, going to her bare which he could see was moist from her desire. Do you like what you see, Naruto-kun? Tsunami asked, sliding a hand down her, and in between her legs, rubbing herself a bit. She didn't know what came over her. While her life with Kaiza had been healthy, it had never quite been this naughty. She then stepped forward to Naruto and dropped to her knees, undoing the zipper to the pants of his orange jumpsuit. She fished her prize out of his pants and her eyes locked onto the sheer size of him. So big, she said before she gave the swollen tip a kiss. So thick. And somewhere in her mind she knew it was only going to get bigger as he grew older. She estimated him to be 10 inches already, and having quite a sizable girth. Naruto hissed in pleasure as he felt Tsunami's soft hand wrap around his and pull him out. Hearing her call him big made his chest swell with pride. At least he was big for her. His body jumped as he felt her give the head a kiss. He ran his hands through her black hair, watching her. She locked eyes with him before dropping her mouth onto him, taking him halfway down almost instantly. Naruto gave a low groan, praying and hoping Kakashi and the others wouldn't wake up. Tsunami hard and deep on the impressive in her mouth as she moved her head deeper, slowly deep-throating him. She got to about 8 inches before she gagged, but that didn't bother her. She had always been a horny naughty woman, just with Inari and the problems with Wave, she's had to repress all of it. She reached between her legs and began to slip her fingers into her as she pulled Naruto's from her mouth. She stroked him and kissed the tip again. "I want you to pound my face, Naruto-kun," she said, licking the underside. "Don't stop for anything. Even if tears are coming out of my eyes, don't stop. When you need to come, just do it down my little throat," Tsunami said. Naruto's eyes grew wide at what she said. "Are you sure?" he asked, wanting to make sure he didn't do anything she didn't like. When she smirked and kissed the tip of his again, he knew he had full okay. Grabbing her dark hair, he drove himself balls deep into her mouth, hearing her gag and give off a sound of choking. Her throat vibrated around him as she gave a moan from his forcefulness. He then began to work her head on and off his forcefully, even as tears began to come down from her eyes. Tsunami did her best to keep up with the insane forceful pace, she really did, and gagging on him and lathering his with her tongue. She loved to, but her first husband and Kaiser hadn't wanted to let her. The young stud in front of her now was practically demanding it of her, and she fully wanted to feel his hot load down her throat. Alas, Naruto was but a virgin and so was expected to come quickly. Slamming balls deep back into her mouth, he moaned fully. "Coming, Tsunami-chan," he said as he felt her tongue snake out and lick at his balls, coaxing as much of his cum out as possible. Tsunami had hoped, dearly, that with Naruto's large balls, he'd give her a nice impressive load, and she was glad he didn't disappoint. In fact, the first shot bloated out her cheeks and she had difficulty keeping up with swallowing. 4 shots later it began to spill down her chin and onto her, where a hand came up and began to rub it in. Had Naruto not been balls deep in her mouth, she might have been able to swallow all of what he gave her. Naruto pulled from her mouth and watched as she coughed a bit, massaging her abused throat. He figured that that would be it and they'd be done. It kind of disappointed him, but he didn't want to be too much on Tsunami. He was surprised when she went and bent over the counter, spreading her legs. "Come here, Naruto-kun. I see you're still hard and I don't want to have you hurting because of it," Tsunami said, her own lust exceeded only by her excitement. She was going to get pounded like a real woman again, and he was just the man to do it. "I'll have you do the prep work tomorrow for practice, but right now I'm wet enough, you should be able to give it to me nicely." Naruto moved over to Tsunami and took a bit of time to make sure he was lining up with the right hole. He rubbed himself against her wet PSSY a bit before he began to push in, feeling her body give for him. Tsunami gave a loud groan as she muffled herself with her hand. Apparently they had the same worries, just about different people. Naruto reached underneath her body and grasped her large in one hand, massaging it rather clumsily as he began to thrust in and out of her body, pushing deeper and deeper the more her opened up for him. He grabbed her hip with his other hand, thrusting a little more as Tsunami bent a little further over, and pressing back into him. Tsunami gave a throaty moan as she felt like crying from being filled so well. By Kami, Naruto was stretching her out, even her used was getting stretched by his girth. She had never felt so good before, and as he made a clumsy attempt to play with her, she loved it. She loved how rough he was. She thrust back into him before leaning up and touching his head. "Harder, Naruto-kun, take me harder and really me. Ruin my for any other man," she whispered to him. She had never been an overly loud lover, but she was sure that he would be fine with that. Naruto took his hand off of Tsunami's and grabbed her hips with both hands and began to thrust deep and hard into her. He used a bit of chakra to make his thrusts harder, hearing Tsunami clamp both hands over her mouth as her moans turned into short screams. His hips slapped against her with a wet meaty sound. He was sure with further experience, he'd be fine, and wouldn't need to blow his load so quickly, but he was barely losing his virginity. Apparently he wasn't the only one having enjoyed themselves. "I'm coming, Naruto-kun," Tsunami said, biting her knuckle as she cried out in orgasm, her body milking Naruto for his cum. Naruto gave a loud moan as he thrust deep inside her body and unloaded inside her, twitching as he pumped her full of his cum. Naruto slowly pulled out, some of his cum leaking from her body. He went cross-eyed when she turned and began to lazily lick him clean. She then collected her robe from the floor and put it on. "Thank you, Naruto-kun." "No problem, Tsunami-chan, no problem at all," Naruto said, grinning as he pulled his pants back on. He grinned as he watched her walk away, her hips swaying. Naruto then went back to his book and noticed it changed back to his game book. He flipped to the level bar. "You have lost your virginity. Plus 300 points. The bar didn't quite fill up, but he wasn't having too much problems against that harem master perk available. Naruto decided to flip to the perks page, and sure enough, a new perk was bold. Harem Master. He tapped on it. Harem Master perk. Requirements. Aura at apprentice level, lost virginity. Allows you to have as many women in your personal harem as you desire. Naruto blinked at that. Why would he want that many women in a harem? Hell, back in Konoha, he'd be lucky if someone even looked at him with enough love to even consider letting him have with another woman. He then tapped on the other perk that had interested him. Rinnegan. Requirements. Have with an Uzumaki, ask Jiraiya of the Sannin about Nagato, chakra levels at 40, defeat another Kekkei Genkai wielder. Allows use of the ultimate dojutsu, the Rinnegan. More information available once unlocked. Naruto noticed that 2 of the 4 were darkened, meaning he had already fulfilled the requirements. "I guess beating Haku counts," he said, and flipped back to the level up page, only to find the bar filled again, had with Tsunami. Plus 200 PTs. The bar filled the rest of the way up, giving him another perk point available and more points to use. He distributed all 5 stat points into his intelligence, making it 25. He then looked to the 29 skill points he had to give. He put the points into his stealth, which had been at 31. Stealth, 60 PTS. Apprentice level. You can now sneak by an unsuspecting Jonin 95% of the time. Also boosts all sneaky skills. Lockpicking, hacking, assassination, lying, pickpocketing, etc. He closed his book and set it under the cushion, before going back to sleep. It was going to be rather interesting when he got back home, that much he was sure. Naruto walked alongside his team reading his book. He found out that the game manual could actually turn into another book if he needed it to. He found it easier to read and then have to deal with someone's questioning if he didn't have to try and come up with a believable lie. Currently he was reading about a space mercenary and was on one of the steamier romance portions of the book. He giggled sometimes, quite like a white-haired Sannin. It caught Sakura's attention unfortunately, and she was hovering over his shoulders trying to read. Again, unfortunately Sakura had a tendency to read aloud. After a time, the pain ebbed and was replaced by a new pleasure. She breathed heavily as he moved even faster, and she met his strokes, driving him even deeper into her body. "What the hell are you reading?" Sakura asked, sounding angry. Kakashi picked up on what she had said and was suddenly over Naruto's shoulder reading the book himself, rather intently on that page. "Next page please, Naruto. Did you two say something?" Naruto asked, looking up from his book. He then went back to it and ducked his head down as Sakura took a swing, her punch missing him. "Kakashi-sensei, did a bird pass us or something?" Sakura composed herself, barely. "What are you reading, Naruto?" she asked, deceptively sweet. "Oh, just a book. It's about a mercenary in space protecting the princess of a planet. They end up falling in love, and thus romance ensues. The author was quite good, mixing humor with violence and Naruto said and instinctively dodged under another punch. I didn't know you could read Dobi. Sasuke said, trying to get a rise out of the blonde. You two don't know much about me. Naruto countered, making his two teammates stop as they realized the truth of that statement. I, however, enjoy reading very much. It allows me to escape from whatever hardships that day brought. Naruto said. So basically you're a bookworm. Great. Another damned one. Sasuke said, shaking his head as he pulled ahead a bit. Kakashi-sensei likes to read too. Naruto said and began to absently talk with Kakashi about their books. Naruto's was naturally better due to one simple thing. Plot. When they got back, they went to debriefing with the Hokage. As soon as the door was open, Naruto shot forward and leapt into the Hokage's lap. I want for Christmas a giant toad, I want a funny hat like yours, and I want a Jonin rank. Sarutobi rolled his eyes before shoving the blonde off of his lap, making it pop in a plume of smoke. Naruto walked in behind Team 7 grinning before adopting a serious thinking look. Wait a second, I get the memories of my clones back. Kakashi and Sarutobi both smacked their foreheads with their palms, but Naruto paid it no mind. The possibilities are endless. No, Sarutobi said flat. You are not allowed to abuse the abilities of the shadow clones like that. Ah, Naruto hung his head before snapping up. So did you, Mrs. Gigi? Sarutobi muttered something under his breath. Report. He told Kakashi, looking up. They got debriefed from their mission, which Naruto talked about animatedly. Once he got paid though, he almost tore out of the office. Raaameen. Kakashi shook his head. I hope that he loses that quirk, but at the same time I hope he keeps it. Naruto dashed, dived, flipped, spun, and danced around people getting to his favorite ramen shop. 3 weeks in wave without ramen nearly drove him insane. While Tsunami's cooking was delicious, and so were the treats he got the last week or so, it was not ramen. Naruto landed on the stool and bounced up and down. Tsuki Gigi. Ayame Nichan. I'm back. I need a refill. I need ramen. The last came out almost as a whimper as Tsuki and Ayame came out from the back chuckling with amusement at Naruto's actions. My usual order, Tsuki Gigi. Tsuki nodded. I'll get right on it. He said before heading into the back to make Naruto the ramen, leaving the blonde with Ayame. Ayame was torn. With Naruto coming back, it was like she had never seen him, and as such she was now seeing him as a man and not her little brother figure. But she was also on the clock and her break would only give her a half hour. That wasn't long enough with Naruto. She also didn't want to upset her father and end up losing out on seeing Naruto around more. Naruto saw the look Ayame was giving him and tilted his head. He knew that look. He had seen it on Tsunami. He wouldn't have figured Ayame to be hungry for a bit of fox. Something wrong, Ayame Nichan? He asked innocently. Ayame smiled and shook her head. Say, Naruto-kun, I'm closing late tonight and my dad is going to play poker with his friends. I'd feel a lot safer if you were around. She said, leaning against the counter a bit, trying to display her, even through the outfit she wore. Naruto smiled. Sure, Nei-chan, he said and watched as Tsuki came back with one bowl of ramen, which Naruto enthusiastically began to dig into. It was his life-sustaining food after all. After about 20 bowls of ramen, Naruto patted his stomach appreciatively, giving a sigh of relief. That hit the spot, thanks old man. Naruto said, paying with the money he got from the wave mission. He didn't use all of it, but 20 bowls of ramen would take a chunk of his paycheck. Naruto, could I talk to you for a moment? Tsuki asked once Ayame entered the back to wash some dishes. He made sure she was out of earshot. Naruto looked to the old man and nodded. What's up? Now, I'm not blind, Naruto. I'm not dumb either. Tsuki said. Ayame wants you pretty badly and you seem to be going willingly with whatever plan she has. Naruto chuckled. You got me there, old man. Tsuki scratched his chin. She's old enough to be making these types of decisions by herself, I guess. Just promise me you won't hurt her. You do realize what you're giving me permission to do, right? Naruto asked incredulously. Tsuki chuckled. She could do a lot worse than a good friend of our family, Naruto. Don't forget to keep coming by for ramen and we'll call it even. Naruto grinned. All right, old man. You bet. Naruto then stood up and headed back home to get a few more looks at the book. After having with Tsunami, he had been expecting a bit more progress, yet he never got quite the same amount after that first time. Once inside, he flipped the book open to his bingo book and looked at Tsunami. They had 7 times, and he got 9 blow jobs from her. He kept waiting for an achievement or something about that, but maybe he was just being picky. A few hours later, he headed out back to the ramen shop and sat down at the bar stool. Tsuki was nowhere in sight, but he could see Ayame milling about as she made the ramen. Hey Naruto-kun, I'm glad you could make it. Ayame said from the back. Could you come on back and help me out a bit with doing the dishes? I'll give you a reward for it. She said in her best innocent voice. Naruto nodded. He had done dishes before for Ayame. He slid into the back of the ramen stand and started to do the dishes, cleaning the bowls. Sometimes he would watch as Ayame bent over to grab some things. While she didn't have the full curves like Tsunami had, Ayame wasn't badly set either. In fact, Naruto was getting quite the rise from watching her move about the kitchen. He gave a soft groan as he realized it was another 2 hours before she would finally close. To someone of Naruto's impatience, those 2 hours went by excruciatingly slowly. Tortuously slow even. But finally, Ayame closed up and they were in the kitchen, the metal gratings pulled down over the front so no one could slip in and vandalize the stand. So does Naruto-kun want his reward? Ayame asked standing in front of Naruto with her hips up. Naruto gave her his best foxy grin before nodding. Ayame's mind went into overdrive. Ever since Naruto came back into the shop, she had been getting wetter and wetter. As she thought about it though, Naruto didn't have this kind of aura to him before he left. Was it because he had left and had seen new places? Was it because he was growing up and she was worried about him not having time for her? She didn't really know what was happening, but she wanted Naruto as her own. Slowly she slid over to him and kissed him, deeply on the lips, her tongue slipping into his mouth and probing it with her own as she slid her leg between his own and continued to kiss him while she rubbed her thigh against Naruto's rapidly hardening length. She had always wanted to have in the shop, just to do it, just for the thrill of it. The fact it was going to be Naruto that took her just made her that much more eager about it. She took his hands and placed one against her. While she didn't have as much of an as some of the other women Naruto could have, she did have a nice shape to it. The other hand, however, she helped brush back to top she wore and had his hands slide under her bra and against her. Again, not as much as say some of the kunoichi, she was still a good handful. Naruto was pleasantly surprised about the soft delicate curves that Ayame had in her boldness. He moved his hand away from her as he pulled back from her lips. He was quick to remove her bra with her help. He then let it down and captured the hardened peak in his mouth before he started to on her. Her soft delicate moans told Naruto she liked that. He ran his tongue around her before rubbing the tip of her with the very tip of his tongue. Her moans were sweet music to his ears. He grabbed firmly onto her with both hands and picked her up, setting her on the counter in the kitchen as he continued to on her. The position would be awkward, but that was what would make it fun. He was just too short for it to be done easily. He'd have to get a step stool. Ayame panted slightly from the foreplay that Naruto performed on her. She briefly wondered where it all came from but didn't care as Naruto began to remove his jumpsuit. She opened the outfit she wore and worked herself out of it. The matching panties went with revealing her bare and wet form to Naruto. She shivered in delight as she felt him spread her legs open. She was expecting him to just jump right into it, but she was pleasantly surprised as he began to kiss her legs, starting from her knee up towards her wet. Ayame had a few lovers in the past, and none had done what she thought Naruto was about to do. She arched her back as she felt a very tender kiss upon her wet. Naruto looked up to Ayame with just his eyes. He had done this a few times with Tsunami, not many that he could say he was excellent at it, but he knew what he was doing well enough apparently. He slid his hands up under her, lifting her up a bit to his mouth. He found her rather quickly and circled it with his hot tongue slowly, sending a shudder through her body that made her toes curl. He then blew cold air on her, heated, making her back arch and Ayame give a low hiss of pleasure. Naruto moved back from her, not wanting her to think he wanted to get her pleasure out of the way quickly. He then licked her wet slit, pressing his tongue flat as he did so. He then pushed his tongue into her, surprised by her taste. It was like he was drinking a mix of honey and rainwater. He had found out from Tsunami that he had a long and wide tongue, good for pleasing women like this. His tongue wiggled and squirmed, not going to any one spot that she might be pleased more with than others. He took his time, exploring the moaning and writhing woman above him because that's what he wanted to do. Naruto began to give slight little hums as he worked his tongue, the vibrations shooting through her and teasing Ayame's body. He felt her hand slid into his blonde hair before pulling him tight into her body. "No more teasing, Naruto-kun," she whispered breathily. "Finish me off." Naruto looked up to her and removed his tongue from her moist entrance before he slid 2 fingers into her, marveling briefly at her tightness. He leaned down and began to on her, working the fingers at a good pace. Not too fast, not too hard, but just right. The assault on Ayame's body did the trick as she came biting her hand and muffling her high moans of pleasure. Ayame lay there for a bit, panting as she recovered from the orgasm. While it was not quite as powerful as the night promised, she had to admit it was quite nice. She then slid off the counter, electing a confused look on Naruto's face before she spun him around and pushed him onto the counter. She then undid his pants, freeing his rather impressive length. She licked her lips before brushing her brown hair out of her face. She then leaned her head down and licked around the swollen tip. Ayame relished in the taste of the blonde. She hadn't done this often, and she flat out refused to be forced to do this. It was meant for someone she cared for, and Naruto was most certainly in that category. She reached up and with slender fingers began to stroke his balls as she worked her head up and down his. She didn't go deep, only taking about 4 inches at a time, but the way Naruto squirmed under her made it all worth it. Ayame felt her hair fall forward and tickle his thighs. She was about to brush it back when Naruto gave a soft spasm, obvious in control of himself enough to not just savagely thrust into her throat. She would have smiled at the thoughtfulness if she wasn't already busy. She was also grinning on the inside as she began to bob her head on and off, her tongue working around his tip when that was all she had in her mouth. She purposely left her hair in her face, letting it tickle Naruto's thighs and on occasion his sakor. His white tight knuckle grip on the counter was all she needed to know he enjoyed the sensation. She felt his balls tighten in her hand and prepared herself as he bit down on his lip to keep from yelling out from the force of his orgasm. Naruto's eyes saw stars as his orgasm tapered off in Ayame's mouth. By the log, he didn't know such simple tenderness was so good. He felt Ayame pull back from his length. He sat up to look to her and she was smiling softly. Naruto couldn't help the smile that slowly came to his own face as he hopped off the counter and set her down on the counter. "Ready?" he asked her as he grabbed a step stool and stood on it, rubbing himself against her slick. When he saw the nod, he teased her by gently prodding the tip into her, not quite penetrating. "Naruto-kun," Ayame said, giving a needy whine. "Quit teasing me," she said, pressing her hips forward, trying in vain to get him to penetrate her. Naruto chuckled before he moved forward and pressed deep into her body before he leaned over her. He then began to work his hips in and out of her. She had a different feel than Tsunami had. She felt tighter, but didn't quite massage his length. It wasn't bad, just different. He felt her hands wrap around his back and her fingers run along his skin. He set a slow speed, tender even as he worked in and out of the beautiful ramen waitress. Ayame's breath caught in her throat as her body was assaulted with the pleasure. It felt supreme, it was glorious, like nothing she had ever felt before. She locked her legs around Naruto's waist as she slid her fingers down his back and then back up. He wasn't overtly muscled, but she could feel the strength of what he had as he worked in and out of her, giving firm solid thrusts to her body. "Oh Kami, you feel so good Naruto-kun," she whispered as he kissed at her neck. Naruto felt the slow rise of pleasure as his slid in and out of her. He felt her tightening up at random intervals as her body had a sharp feeling of pleasure course through it. He leaned over her so that he could feel her and hard brush against his chest. He could easily qualify this as the best so far. Ayame reached up and grabbed Naruto's hair, bringing him closer to her and kissing him on the lips, sliding her tongue into his mouth. She was surprised when he didn't fight it as she rolled her hips into him. This was so intense for her, she didn't want to stop. She could feel her orgasm approaching, her body coiling tighter and tighter. Naruto could feel her impending orgasm, so began to give harder and faster thrusts, nothing that would make this any less tender, but to help her along. He felt her clamp down on his and he kissed her deeper, muffling her with his mouth as she moaned loudly in orgasm. His own orgasm took over him as he moaned into her mouth, pumping his cum into her body. He didn't mind the slight salty taste as they kissed. It was not something he wanted to experience often, but for a kiss he wasn't worried about it. Ayame came down from her orgasmic high and looked up to Naruto as she pulled back from his lips. She smiled some more, happy that he didn't seem to mind. With all the strength she could muster, she flipped him over so he was once again sitting on the counter. She put her hands on his shoulders before she began to work her up and down on his. Her nails dug in slightly into his shoulders and she could have sworn she felt him get harder inside her from that. Naruto was pleasantly surprised as Ayame flipped them over and began to ride him. He would have thought that she went once before ending, but here they were going another round. He briefly mused what was in the water of fire country that gave them higher stamina. He cupped Ayame's in his hands before he kissed her neck, going to her shoulder as she moaned above him. Soon his mouth was at her and he was on her pert again. Ayame moaned loudly as Naruto began to on her again. She moved one hand from his shoulder and put it to the back of his head, gently scratching his scalp, egging him on. "If you keep this up Naruto-kun, I won't last long." She whimpered as she kept rolling her hips against him, making sure his was in as deep as she could take it. Naruto heard what she said and began to massage her, squeezing and rubbing as he thrust up into her, meeting her thrusts with his own. A sudden stab of jealousy went through him as he imagined the beautiful ramen waitress with someone else. He leaned up to her neck and kissed at the swell of slight muscle there before biting down, hard enough to draw blood but not enough to cause pain through the wonderful pleasure. "No matter who else I may be intimate with, you are going to be mine, someone I will make time to be with," Naruto said as he continued to work in and out of her, feeling his second orgasm fast approaching. Ayame's breath caught in her throat as she heard the words. While she was worried that Naruto might not be satisfied with just her, she thought about it and remembered that he was a stamina freak. She gave a small smile at his words. Of course he'd make time to be with her. He had always made time. She kissed him again, feeling her body tighten up, and she knew the glorious end was near. She screamed into her mouth, this orgasm much more powerful than the last as it took her clamping down on his. Naruto gave a long drawn-out groan into the kiss as he fired his cum into her body, gripping her. He pulled back and panted, his eyes slightly glazed. "Oh wow," he managed weakly. He felt his body recovering quickly, praise to his stamina. Ayame slipped off Naruto's body and looked to him. "Did you mean what you said?" she asked a little nervously. Naruto nodded as he stood and hugged her. "Of course I did, Ayame-nichan. I promise I'll always make time for you," Naruto said before he leaned up and gently kissed her lips. He then helped her clean up their mess. She and her father still had to cook on that counter, so they made sure to clean it off nicely. Once Naruto was dressed and he had walked Ayame home, he began to head back to his house. He felt good, and not because of the witch had been great. He felt good because of the tenderness of it. It felt like she was his first true lover. As he entered his apartment, he was grinning even more as he thought about the events. Ayame was passionate, there was no doubt about that, and he planned to see just how passionate she could be. His mind then replaced passionate with kinky, and he began to blush a bit. Ayame in leather might be interesting. He picked up the book and flipped to the level up page, curious as to what all he got this time. Congratulations. You have had 10 blowjobs. Plus 1000 points. Naruto watched as the bar filled up to level 5 and he banked the points. He then watched it continue to rise from the 10 blowjobs and rise up to level 6. It then rose just a few points up over level 6. Congratulations. You had with Ayame. Plus 350 points. He was about 400 points, he guessed, from hitting level 7. Naruto then went to the stats page and pondered what he had. He had 10 points to work with and he supposed a higher intelligence should work. He bumped it up by 5 points, allowing himself to be at 30 intelligence. He then boosted chakra control up to 25. He switched over to the skills. He had 71 points to work with. He looked through his ninjutsu, taijutsu, genjutsu, and various other ninja skills. He wasn't sure what skill he wanted to level up. He found pickpocketing and felt a twinge. It wasn't a twinge he felt often, but every time he followed it, it had worked out quite well. In fact, it was this twinge he felt when he had noticed the shadow clone jutsu. Without hesitating, he poured 70 points into it. Pickpocketing, 75 points. Apprentice level. You can now pick the pockets of a jonin 95% of the time. Naruto nodded to himself and put the last into his aura. He snapped the book closed and put it to the side before heading to bed, wondering what he'd need the pickpocketing for. Naruto was in a good mood. He had his morning ramen, got an under-the-table delight from Ayame, and was now heading off to train. He headed first to the Uchiha district and yelled in. "Oi, Tem, we need to go." Kakashi-sensei said he'd be on time for once. He yelled out. "Oh, hello Naruto-kun," a woman said before she came into view. Naruto was briefly taken back by the stunning and beautiful woman. "Are you looking for Sasuke?" she asked. Naruto swallowed at the sight of Makoto Uchiha. Her picture in his book definitely did not do her justice. "Yeah, do you know where he is, Makoto-san?" "He's already left." Said something about Kakashi-san being on time for once. She said with a small smile. "Thanks." Naruto shouted before taking off at a dead run. Makoto sighed, watching Naruto run off. "He looks so much like his father but acts more like his mother," she whispered. She bit her lip, remembering briefly the only time she got with Minato. It had been an accident and Kushina had participated, so no one could be to blame. Except for a certain toad Sanin that spiked their drinks, making them even more drunk than what they should have been. The beating he received, he had no recollection of because it gave him amnesia. She sighed softly as she thought more about random little things while she headed into her room. That threesome had destroyed any life she had while married. She used a genjutsu to trick Fugaku into thinking they were having. She knew Sasuke had been artificially inseminated, and no one knew but her and the doctor that did the procedure. "Get your mind off of it, Makoto," she scolded herself as she lay down on her bed. However, her mind went back to that night and her toes curled as she thought about it. "I bet Naruto inherited his dad's strength," she mused out loud as she thought on the blonde. She began to remove her clothes, desperate for some attention, even if she had to give it to herself. She slid 2 fingers into her mouth, licking at them, and as she went. It had been a wild night and for some reason she had her Sharingan activated that entire night. She didn't mind though, she committed it to memory. Kushina had stripped Makoto of all her clothes before going down on her. Since Kushina's mouth was busy, she offered to help out Minato. But it wasn't the blonde and the redhead she had slept with so many years ago that had her thoughts now. It was their son, with that same wild blonde hair, but the unending stamina of his parents, though Minato had much less. He's also got his mom's enthusiasm. Her hand went between her legs, touching her swollen and giving a soft moan before her fingers slid against her slit. She grabbed her own as she sought her own pleasure, working 2 fingers inside her. She was completely happy with her body. A nice set of double Ds made men stare, and the fact she still trained and kept her body taut, well, she was sure Naruto would love that. Oh, how she would love to have the little blonde bundle of energy in her bed. Her fantasies had always been rather dirty. Fugaku would never have done any of them, but Naruto, she would beg for him if she had to. Makoto felt her core tighten up as he fingers worked in and out of her. She would never admit it to anyone who hadn't seen that side of her, but she was not one that would go out on anyone. No, she was in that with the person that saw that side of her, she would do just about anything for them. If that meant wearing a collar and taking Naruto's cum on her face, with her Sharingan activated, then she would do so willingly. Oh Naruto! She cried out as she came, her back arching high and her eyes rolling back in her head. She hadn't cum that hard in so long. She panted and pulled her fingers from her. If she had her way, she'd be enjoying those types of orgasms a little while later. With Naruto grumbled as he moved about the training field, pacing. Kakashi-sensei wasn't on time. Freaking figured. So he practiced his chakra control, and his stealth movement. He figured he would need them eventually. He knew that the only way to level them up would be to level up, but that didn't mean he couldn't train them. But every time he leveled something up, it was like he instantly knew what to do, like he had been doing it for years. Sometimes he wasn't sure though, and while he didn't mind the easy level up system, what would happen if he lost the game? Could he lose the game? What if he won? Did he die peacefully or go back to the start with everything? His musings were broken when Sasuke looked over at him. Dobi, why do I have the sudden urge to beat the shit out of you for no damned reason? Naruto looked to Sasuke and shrugged. I don't know. I haven't done anything yet. The most I did was pass by the Uchiha district and meet your mom. Sasuke thought about it. Oh yeah. Sasuke reached into his pouch and pulled out a sealed envelope, flicking it to Naruto. My mom said to give that to you. I have no idea why. Naruto broke the seal on the envelope and pulled out the letter. Dear Naruto, my name is Mikoto, I'm Sasuke's mom. Naruto rolled his eyes a bit at that. He bit back a sarcastic thought at the letter. Could you perhaps come by after team training today? I've heard the details about the wave mission from Sasuke, but I want a different perspective on them, and since I knew your mom, I was hoping you could give it to me. I'll even tell you about your mom if you'd come by. Naruto's eyes widened at this part. He was trembling. He balled the letter up and closed his eyes as a few tears fell down from his eyes. Here he had a person who could tell him about his mom, and he was scared about it. Did he want to find out that his mom had just been an uncaring civilian? He always had this fantasy about his mom being a beautiful kunoichi that was well respected, a woman that would have made a kind and caring mother to him. What does my mom want, Dobi? Sasuke asked. Naruto shook his head. Nothing, Tem. Just wants to talk to me after team training. Says she knew my mom and wants to tell me about it. Sasuke threw another thing at Naruto, which the blonde caught. It was a key. That's so you can get into the district. Just give it to my mom when you get there. I'll be training after this. Naruto nodded and pocketed the key, ignoring the pout from Sakura. Funny, with his libido unlocked and having all that he could get, Sakura just didn't appeal to him anymore. Oh, she was smart and cute to him still, but no appeal to him. An hour later, Kakashi finally decided to show up. You're late. Sakura shouted at him. I have a valid excuse this time. I was getting you the forms for the chunin exams. Kakashi said, passing out the 3 forms. Naruto looked at it. With his current skill set, was he ready? He decided that he was and grinned. When and where? Kakashi gave an eye smile. Just sign those forms and bring them to the academy. Room 301 in a week. Naruto nodded and headed off, wanting to talk to a certain Uchiha to find out about his mom. For that kind of information, he wouldn't withhold any information about Wave and he wouldn't exaggerate anything either. When he arrived at the compound, he opened the gate and headed inside before closing the gate. Makoto was just getting out of the shower, wanting to be fresh for when Naruto arrived, when she heard the gate open. She knew it wasn't Sasuke. He always went to train some more in private after team training. She smiled knowing it would be Naruto. She got dressed in a nice but casual outfit that consisted of a swishy skirt that came to her knees and a blouse that would expose a lot of cleavage. The outfit would emphasize her womanly curves. Being a mother had its benefits, and she wanted Naruto almost drooling. Underneath she had her special lingerie, a nice red thong and bra set that she hadn't worn for anyone. Both were extremely see-through, just barely hiding the good bits. She then walked out to the door, licking her lips. She heard as someone knocked and headed over to it to open the door. Naruto didn't have to wait long for Makoto to open the door and he was briefly surprised at how she was dressed. The red blouse and black skirt looked good on her. You said you wanted to talk with me in your letter. Makoto nodded with a smile and led him inside. Come on in, Naruto, she said politely. Naruto watched her from behind as he followed her to the kitchen. He knew that walk, it was the walk only a female could do. It was a walk saying she was on the prowl. What the hell did he do in a past life to deserve a hot MILF like her? Oh Tem, your mom is so. I so win everything from on. Naruto thought as he stared a bit at the swaying in front of him. I'm sorry for dragging you all the way out here, but you have to understand Sasuke is my baby boy, I don't want to lose him on a mission anytime soon. Makoto said as she began to prepare some tea. I just have to make sure he's not doing anything reckless. Naruto nodded. I understand Makoto-san, he said as he sat down. I'm sure my mother, whoever she may be, would feel the same wherever she is. Makoto dropped a mug as she spun around wide-eyed. You mean Hokage-sama hasn't even told you the name of your mother? She practically shouted. Naruto was taken aback by this but nodded. I don't know the name of my parents, he said softly. Makoto moved over and sat down looking shocked. By the log, that man can be so dense. Kushina Uzumaki was my best friend and more importantly your mom, Makoto said with a smile. Naruto felt pride well up inside him. His surname wasn't some random last name. It was his real last name. See, can you tell me about her? What about my dad? He asked. Makoto bit her lip. I can, she said softly. But you have to promise me, give me your word that no matter what happens, until Hokage-sama says otherwise, you cannot tell anyone about who your dad is. Not Sasuke, not Sakura, not Kakashi-san, no one. You never know who is listening in, you never know who those people could tell. If word got out that you are his son, Shinobi would be after you to kill you. Shinobi of Zabuza's strength and stronger. Promise me, you won't tell anyone. Makoto said seriously as she put her hand on Naruto's. Naruto's eyes widened as he thought about Shinobi being stronger than Zabuza. Who was his father that they would send Shinobi of that caliber after him? I promise, I won't tell anyone until Gigi says I can. Naruto said seriously. Makoto nodded softly, preparing to comfort the boy in case he had a breakdown. Your father was Minato Namikaze, she said. She had never called the man by his title, and he wouldn't introduce him as such to his own son. Naruto's eyes went wide as he felt a cold feeling slide down his spine. His father, his dad was his hero. His dad saved the village at the cost of his own life. His dad had sealed the Kyuubi inside of his gut. My dad is the fourth. Naruto could barely comprehend it. He slowly put his hands against his forehead and slid his fingers through his hair. Naruto, listen to me. If the event with the Kyuubi not happened, your mother and father would have loved you more than any other parent in the world. She said, having his attention. The entire 10 months your mother was pregnant with you, your father never left her side. He used shadow clones to do the paperwork as Hokage. I wish you could have known just how much they would have loved you. She said, moving over and pulling the blonde into a hug, his head lying on her. But with the Kyuubi incident, I don't know the full details, but I was privy to information that was withheld from most people. From there I've been making conclusions. They're just educated guesses really. She said. What do you know? Naruto asked, looking up to the Uchiha matriarch. Your mom was the holder for Kyuubi before you. She ignored his slight gasp. The seal weakens during childbirth, and Minato was going to hold the seal while you were being born. I know Minato, and I know him with seals. He wouldn't have let the seal break, so I think someone attacked and distracted Minato before the seal had time to properly set back in. The rest I'm sure you know. The Kyuubi got sealed inside you. The disappearance of the Kyuubi is likely what killed Kushina. Naruto thought about all that she told him. Could I come by again and talk to you about them? He asked. I know so much about Minato Namikaze the Hokage and the Yellow Flash, but I know next to nothing about him as Minato Namikaze the man. I've never even heard of Mom. Makoto smiled, knowing she likely wouldn't be getting any tonight. That was until she pulled back and her hand brushed against something that was not soft in any meaning of the word. She could honestly say Naruto inherited his dad's size and apparent like for. Now, I sated your knowledge a little bit. Think you can tell me about Wave? Naruto nodded and began to tell her everything. Sasuke's achievements, his own achievements, Sasuke's failures, his own failures, everything that he thought would be useful he told her without a second thought. As he told her these things, he noticed things. Little things really, touching and looks, things that told him the Uchiha matriarch wanted him pretty badly. Truth be told, he wanted her pretty badly himself. Who would have thought Sasuke's mom would be so hot? She stood up and went over to the broken mug that had fallen and began to pick up the shards. Naruto stared at her a little bit as he watched her clean up. Well, he figured it was time to stop being so subtle. If he was wrong, he'd figure it out. Standing up, he went over to her as she got another mug. He slid his hands onto her waist and pressed against her round, making her gasp a little bit. You know Makoto-chan, he said in an almost sing-song voice. You look quite desirable in this outfit. He said, feeling her relax in his hold. He still didn't have a smooth pick-up line, he really didn't. Oh, so you do like it, Naruto-kun? She asked, pressing her round back into his groin a bit, feeling his hard. She sure hoped she'd get to experience all that powerful endurance. I wore it just for you. You see, I'm hoping you could help me with a bit of a problem. She said. Naruto chuckled. I think I know your problem, Makoto-chan. He said. His hands snuck up to her large and gave a good firm squeeze. You haven't had a good in a few years. Longer than you think, Naruto-kun. She said, arching her back into his hands. The last time I ended up having a threesome with your mom and dad. Instead of being put off on that, she could have sworn he got harder. A little freaky, aren't you? Naruto asked. The thought of a naughty MILF turned him on like nothing else. She turned back to him with a smile. I'll be your little toy if you treat me good, Naruto-kun. Have you been with anyone? She asked. Naruto nodded. 2 civilians, one of which was on the Wave mission. Oh, you are a naughty man. Makoto said, turning around. But as a shinobi I have better stamina, even if I'm retired. You'll be able to do so much more with me in one single go. She said, unzipping his jumpsuit and pushing it off his shoulders. Now, I don't know about other women, but I also like to do more things than most women. If you want to come on my face and I'll welcome it. If you want to try anal with me, I'll lube you up with my mouth. She said and removed his mesh undershirt. But I want you to go until you can't go anymore. Naruto couldn't help but grin. Now that was something that he could do. He had endurance in spades. Naruto tugged her skirt down off her body and rubbed her bare hips, liking the little peek-a-boo show with her body due to the red thong. He then undid her top and tossed it off to the side, seeing the matching bra. Well, Makoto-chan, I want you to kneel. Naruto said. He then watched as the Uchiha matriarch did as he asked, undoing his pants and pulling his heart out. He gave him a few pumps, but that wouldn't cut it with Naruto. He rubbed the swollen tip against her lips a bit before pushing through them and into her mouth. Makoto couldn't help but give a soft moan as she tasted Naruto and began to take him deeper into her mouth, sliding her tongue all over his hard shaft. His tasted good to her. She hadn't had anything so tasty in so long. She looked up as she cupped his balls and fondled them, enjoying his look of pleasure. He most certainly wasn't his father, and she was going to enjoy this immensely. Naruto grabbed Makoto by the back of her head and began to make her take him deeper. He'd sink in 4 inches, pull her back 3, sink her head down 4 inches, pull back 3. He was getting a full workout on his from her. When he looked down, he noticed she had the Sharingan activated. That spurred him on as he kept working his in and out of her mouth, soon making sure that she took all 10 inches of his down. Makoto felt her throat full of this man's and gave a moan. She pulled off, however, and gave the head a few licks, stroking the bottom 6 inches of it with her hand. You're quite delicious, and I'll try deep-throating you more another time, but right now I want your cum. She said before she began to work her head off the first 4 inches, working her hand over the rest of him, occasionally sliding her head down further and removing her hand. Naruto groaned lowly as she kept working so much. He felt her tongue swirl around the tip before she began to firmly on his, hollowing out her cheeks in the process as she kept going down on him. Damn, I'm going to cum Makoto-chan. He said and held her head in place as she licked in at his, milking his balls for his cum. He gave a loud moan as he had his orgasm, filling her mouth with his thick cum. She swallowed, even with his in her mouth, giving him an even more pleasant sensation as a few more bursts of cum entered her mouth. Makoto pulled back and licked her lips as she swallowed the remnants of his cum in her mouth. She looked up to him with a smirk and kissed the swollen head of his. Have you had a tit job before, Naruto-kun? She asked, removing the red lacy bra and exposing her large firm perky for the blonde before her. No, I can't say I have, Makoto-chan. Naruto said and watched as she stood up, motioning him to her room. He dutifully followed, curious as to why they were going to her room. Makoto pulled him over to her bed and sat him down. She then went to her nightstand and grabbed a bottle of oil and sashayed back over to him, purposely walking to emphasize her hips in her. She knelt between his legs and kissed his toned chest. Such a strong young man, she said before she poured about a tablespoon of oil on her and began to work it in with her hands. For a tit job, you don't have to have oil, I just like to because it is a special oil that heats up when exposed to oxygen. It's just enough to have a nice warm feeling. She then slid his between her oily and pushed them together tightly. She then began to work her chest up and down on his. Naruto moaned softly. While a hand job felt good, the skin on skin tended to pull and usually didn't feel right. However, with the oil on her, the skin didn't pull as she moved up and down. He found something new to enjoy during, and he was enjoying it immensely at that moment. He grabbed her shoulders for some leverage and began to thrust his hips upwards to meet how she moved her downwards on his. They were soft, like big pillows, and he briefly wondered what it would be like to sleep on them. Makoto suppressed a grin as she worked her up and down. Take that, Kushina. I told you my would always beat yours. Minato liked them more, and even your son likes my. She thought as she began to pinch and squeeze her pink, giving herself some pleasure. She had no doubt she would orgasm hard when she had this nice inside her, but that didn't mean she couldn't do something for herself. Naruto was in heaven, and he knew it, especially when his was about to blow. He quickened his pace and Makoto seemed to know what was going to happen, so she stopped moving, letting him do as he wanted. Naruto tilted the Uchiha matriarch's head down so she could watch as his tip moved in and out from her cleavage. Close. I'm so close. Naruto panted out before with another loud throaty moan he had his orgasm, several spurts of cum landing on her cheeks, her chin, and on her lips. What didn't have enough oomph behind it to land on her face fell on her, mixing with the oil. Makoto licked her lips, getting the tasty cum off them before standing up. Okay Naruto-kun, I served you twice. Now I want you to pound she said, running a finger up along the underside of his shaft. She pulled the thong off her body before tossing it to the side. You will pound my right? She asked, giving him a slightly sad begging look, affectionately called the puppy dog eyes jutsu. Small children and women were masters of it. Her Sharingan and the cum on her face ruined the look a little bit, but she saw Naruto caving. Yes, I will, Naruto said as he jumped to his feet. He then picked Makoto up. He didn't dare grunt, but she was heavier than Ayame or Tsunami, likely because of the muscles her body had. Muscles weighed more after all. Pressing her against a wall, Naruto spread her legs wide and rubbed his tip against her entrance before pushing in deep. They moaned in unison as his thick began to stretch out her underused. Don't be gentle Naruto-kun, Makoto said, wrapping her legs around the blonde before her. She liked his choice of the wall. It would be less stress on her bed. She felt the blonde get into a rhythm and she moaned softly as she felt his thrust start out light. There was no doubt that Naruto was thick, and he was stretching her quite well. She felt his thrusts begin to pick up in strength and speed, and soon she was moaning louder and louder as he hit every pleasurable spot inside her. It had been way too long since she had this. Naruto had taken a bit to find a good angle and rhythm so that he could get the most out of this. As he drove his in and out of her wet, he gave low moans that were steadily rising in volume. He heard her moans get louder and louder. He still wasn't 100% sure if he was that good, but apparently he was big enough that it didn't matter too much if he was good or not. His gaze was drawn to her large bouncing. Supporting her weight with one arm, he grabbed one of her and circled her large pink with his tongue before clamping his teeth down on it. He tasted the oil, but didn't let that bother him as he began to on her, thrusting faster and harder as he supported her with both hands again. Makoto almost screamed as she felt Naruto bite into her and with his teeth still firmly around it. It was an amazing feeling, and her had always been sensitive. Oh yes, right there Naruto-kun, she shouted out as he slammed into a particularly sensitive spot of her. Seeing her reaction, he took her words to heart and her mind started to go into euphoria. Her body was already tightening up as she began to prepare for the orgasm. She began to thrust her own hips against his hips, trying to get the most out of it. The coil in her body tightened more and more and she felt herself close to the edge. Naruto bit down on her again and that was it. With a loud scream, she had her orgasm, her entire body stiffening up, her clamping down and milking the berry deep inside. Her nails dug into Naruto's back as she spasmed some. Naruto grit his teeth, both in slight pain from her nails and denying himself the orgasm that wanted to wash over him. He hadn't thought she would orgasm so hard, but there was no denying that her eyes were rolled back and her tongue lolled out of her mouth a bit. When she finally became coherent enough for him to continue, he started at a steady pace. He'd pull out slowly but then drive in hard. Naruto had noticed how sensitive her had been and began to bite at the one he hadn't given attention to. His thrusts got stronger and faster as he began to pummel her again. But he stayed at the steady pace, pulling his out slowly before driving in hard. It kept him away from his orgasm for a time, while also building up Makoto. Makoto's breathing was already getting ragged. She couldn't believe the blonde machine just slowly pounding her. She could feel he wanted to come. The slight twitches in his told her that as she kept her squeezing his. The fact he was holding it back, knowing it would cause himself discomfort, was rather impressive. She rewarded the blonde by burying his face into her. Hard on my Naruto-kun, bit them and tease them please. She said with a little needy whine in her breath. I've always been sensitive to they'll turn me into your own personal quivering Uchiha too. She said. Naruto gave a groan into the fullness of her. She was playing dirty by talking dirty like that. He smirked though. He loved a challenge and pulled back from her. "You're going to be mine Makoto Uchiha," he told her as he began to thrust faster, his finally unable to take any more waiting. "I'm going to make you scream in ecstasy as you're into nothing short of orgasmic oblivion," Naruto said, thrusting faster. He finally drove himself in as deep as he could and gave a loud moan, louder than he had ever been, and came deep inside her body. Makoto felt the hot rush of cum from the blonde in front of her. His words seemed to do the trick in getting her to the edge. His load spilling out into her finished her off, and with a short scream, she had another orgasm. She pulled the blonde into her with her legs and arms as she quivered. When they both came down from the orgasm though, she slid off of him and knelt before him. "I'm going to clean you up really well," she said as she began to lick their combined juices off his. She only licked at his, getting every inch wet with her saliva instead of their juices. When she was done, Makoto stood up and sashayed over to the bed, knowing she had Naruto staring at her. She got on her hands and knees, pushing her back out towards him. Naruto watched her before moving over to her. The air was quickly drying the spit on his, but he saw the small bottle of oil and decided to use that. He poured about a tablespoon out on her and began to rub it, giving her a nice shiny sheen. He geared his hand back and gave her a nice hard slap, making her give a loud moan. He then poured a bit more onto her crack and began to work it into her hole with his finger. She was going to be tight, and he was going to enjoy it. Naruto began to rub his between her cheeks, getting it lubed up with the excess oil. When he thought it would be enough, he began to press the tip into her entrance, feeling it slowly give to him. Makoto whimpered as she felt the blonde monster enter her. "Easy Naruto-kun, take your time and make sure I'm going to be ready for you to start pounding," Makoto instructed. When it hurt, and thus far it had been great. She felt the length of his slowly ease deeper into her, and she whimpered some more, reaching under her to play with her, trying to alleviate some of the twinges of pain. He was just so thick. Naruto listened to what Makoto had said. He didn't want to hurt her, so he started easy, moving in and out of her as he felt her body slowly get accustomed to his size. While he promised to her into an orgasmic oblivion, he wasn't going to be cruel and just drive himself into her. He began to massage her, enjoying the feel of the globes of flesh in his hands. He noticed she was slowly relaxing and it was getting easier to move. Makoto was panting at this point. "Okay. Go ahead Naruto-kun," she said in a breathy moan. She began to moan full-throaty as the blonde slowly began to pick up speed and strength with his thrusts. The first time she had done this, she had enjoyed it. She had no idea that doing it with Naruto was going to feel amazing for her. She panted louder as she moaned, her body going into overdrive. Her breath was coming short, but she loved it. Naruto gripped Makoto's hips as he began to go faster and harder, soon putting his back and hips into it as he gave powerful and hard thrusts. The sound of wet flesh slapping together filled the air, overshadowed by Makoto's loud moans. Naruto saw her bouncing raven hair and reached out, grabbing it and pulling back as he thrust harder and faster. His felt great in her and he was only going to give it to her harder. He slapped her as firmly again. "This is what I'm talking about," Naruto said as he kept burying his into her as deep as it would go. Makoto panted loudly now, her back arched because of Naruto's hold on her hair. "Yes. Harder please Naruto-kun, my harder," she said, pressing her hips back into Naruto's. "Make me your personal. I'll do everything you ask of me," she said as she looked into the mirror to see the blonde thrusting in and out of her. The strength of his thrusts only seemed to increase and it was slowly driving her insane. Naruto soon rolled her onto her left side with her leg lifted up and over his shoulder as he kept thrusting into her. He had something he wanted to do that he had been sure he wouldn't really be able to do with Ayame or any other civilian. He put his hands in his favorite hand sign and summoned up 2 shadow clones. The 2 clones nodded to the original and went to work. One moved to Makoto's, kneeling beside Naruto and pushing into the Uchiha matriarch as Naruto worked in and out of her. The other clone moved to Makoto's mouth where she began to eagerly on the tip. Makoto couldn't believe it. She had always wanted to try and take several guys at once, and naturally the shadow clone jutsu was best for such a thing because then she could go with only one good guy. Yet Fugaku wouldn't dare try such a thing with his lower reserves of chakra. Now she had a chakra battery her, with his clones working over her other holes. She felt the rough hand on her hair slowly making her deep throat again, and despite the roughness, she moaned against the full in her mouth and throat. She pulled back and glanced back. More, please, please Naruto-sama, give your dirty Uchiha more. Naruto raised his eyebrow at the reaction before shrugging. He formed another 6. Any more and they'd likely get bored and start fighting with each other to get to the hot MILF. He watched as Makoto showed her flexibility to get to each of the clones she could as he grabbed her leg a little tighter and started to thrust more vigorously. Makoto moaned at the sight of the rest of the blondes, and the feeling of the original her harder. 2 were up by her head now, alternating who was getting. Her tongue lashed along the thick shafts, with her teeth scraping the flesh. Her throat vibrated as she moaned to for all 9 blondes. Her left arm was up behind her back and she was jerking off a third blonde, using quick short strokes. One was straddling her body, and letting her right hand jerk his with longer slower strokes. One had maneuvered himself to slap his between her and use them to get himself off, having to hold her large in place himself. The last 2 were using her soft hair to jerk themselves off with, and quite frankly she was happy about it. It was flattering that her body was being used in such a dirty manner. The original Naruto grit his teeth as he felt his impending orgasm. His balls tightened up and he felt the sudden rush of pleasure as he released in Makoto's, feeling the heat of his cum against his length as he slowly pumped in a few times to make sure he gave her everything. He slowly eased out of her and pulled away. Keep going guys, I'm going to take a shower. Naruto said watching one of his clones taking his place, not at all perturbed by the feeling of his own cum in the Uchiha matriarchs. Naruto headed to the bathroom and started a hot shower. If 8 clones couldn't keep Makoto busy, he would be thoroughly impressed. However, at the same time his clones wouldn't last that long, being only 1/9 of the whole. Naruto stayed in the shower for 30 minutes, washing himself thoroughly to get the smell off of his body. Last thing he wanted to do is explain why he had banged Sasuke's mom. Naruto came out wrapped in a towel and wasn't all that surprised to see his clothes now working Makoto over in a different position. Makoto was doing her best to ride one clone, while another plowed her from behind. Her hands and mouth worked over the other 6, jerking in. Her eyes were slightly gazed, and her breathing was quite labored. The clones noticed the original and moved away, circling Makoto who stuck her tongue out and began to rub her. Come on boys, give it to me. Give me all your hot cum. She spoke twisting her. Cover this Uchiha with it, mark my body with proof of your dominance. She said. The Naruto clones jerked themselves off. It wasn't long for the first spurts of cum to happen, catching Makoto on the side of the face. The next one caught her almost right between the eyes, going down to her tongue and chin. 2 focused their attention on her, letting her rub it in. 1 jerked himself into Makoto's hair, as another shot got her on the cheeks and lips. 1 got bold and stuck the tip into Makoto's mouth, making her swallow all of the thick cum. The last one decided to even her out a bit and let his cum fall in her hair on the other side of her face. The original Naruto walked over and smirked, seeing the mess his clones made of the Sasuke's mom. Damn, he said impressed. The clones then all dispelled at once, and the mental backlash caused Naruto's balls to tighten as he remembered the pleasure of how his clones worked Makoto over rather thoroughly. He moved and unloaded what felt like 8 orgasms all at once and he felt the Kyuubi's chakra go to his balls, no doubt to with the production of 8 orgasms worth of cum and to help ease the deep-seated ache in his balls. His load caught Makoto on the bottom half of her face and on her. Makoto wiped her eyes and licked her fingers as she looked up at the original blonde. While physical memory doesn't go back, You do feel what they feel, so if you get 8 orgasms worth of memories. Naruto laughed some. Yeah, I know, he said and leaned down. He picked her up bridal style, making her blush as he carried her to the bathroom. There he got a wet washcloth and began to wipe her face and neck with it, clearing it of the cum. Why Naruto-kun, if I didn't know any better, I'd think you wanted more than. Makoto said with a slight grin. She wouldn't be against it, she could tell the blonde would be worth it. Naruto looked at Makoto and closed his eyes. He could see a future with her, granted Sasuke didn't try to kill him first. He opened his eyes and leaned in, kissing Makoto. Sure, if you don't mind. He then leaned into her neck and like he did with Ayame, he bit down until he tasted a bit of blood. Makoto touched the mark, the endorphins still rushing through her body making it so she barely felt it. It stung when she touched it though. I'm exhausted, she said shaking her head. Naruto chuckled. No round 2? He asked jokingly. Makoto laughed. Go on, get out of here before Sasuke gets back, she said and playfully slapped the blonde's chest. Naruto gave her a quick kiss before heading to the kitchen where their clothes were. He dressed in his own before taking Makoto's clothes to her room. He then headed out, going home with a slight skip to his step. When Naruto got home, he sat on his bed and flipped open the book to the level up page. With Makoto Uchiha, plus 1000 points, plus 10 ninjutsu, plus 10 genjutsu, plus 10 taijutsu, plus 10 kenjutsu, Naruto banked the points from the level up but was surprised to see the bonuses to his ninja skills. Had vaginal 10 times, plus 2000 points, Naruto once again banked the level up points, having quite a few now. Obtained the bronze outdo your rival medal. Plus 250 points, Naruto looked confused, but just waited. Obtained the silver outdo your rival medal. Plus 500 points. Obtained the gold outdo your rival medal. Plus 1000 points. Obtained the platinum outdo your rival medal. Plus 2000 points. Obtained the diamond outdo your rival medal. Plus 1 perk point. Obtained the bronze clone man medal. Plus 300 points. Obtained the silver clone man medal. Plus 600 points. Obtained the gold clone man medal. Plus 1200 points. Obtained the platinum clone man medal. Plus 2400 points. Naruto blinked at all of it. That was a lot of points in one go. He banked all of them, noticing his level had shot up. Naruto then decided to find out about these medals. It took him flipping through the book, to after the perks, to find them. He tapped the outdo your rival medal. Bronze. Get a blow job from your rival's mother. Silver. Your rival's mother in the. Gold. Cum on your rival's mother's face. Platinum. Your rival's mother in the. Diamond. Gang bang your rival's mother. Naruto then went ahead and tapped the clone man medal. Bronze. Use 1 shadow clone to have with a woman or women. Silver. Use 2 shadow clones to have with a woman or women. Gold. Use 4 shadow clones to have with a woman or women. Platinum. Use 8 shadow clones to have with a woman or women. Naruto could guess what the diamond would be from what he had seen. Who was he going to convince to have with 16 clones? He flipped back to the level up page in case he got anything else. Perks added. Naruto stared at the words before heading over to the perks page where 4 were glowing up at the top. They weren't unlocked, not yet anyways. Hiroshin Jutsu. Requirements. Learn the truth about the 4th Hokage. Chakra level 60, Chakra control 60, Intelligence 40, Acrobatics 55, Endurance 50, Speed 50, and Ceiling 100. Allows use of the signature move of the 4th Hokage. You can now teleport to your women when needed. Naruto stared at it. That wasn't being obtained anytime soon. Sharingan. Requirements. Have with an Uchiha. Obtain the silver. Outdo your rival. Medal. Chakra levels 40. Chakra control 40. Dojutsu that allows you to cast genjutsu with your eyes, read your opponent's taijutsu, and copy their moves. Also allows for copying ninjutsu. Naruto snorted. He didn't really want that. Mangekyo Sharingan. Requirements. Obtain the gold, outdo your rival, medal. Take the Sharingan perk. Chakra levels 50. Chakra control 50 allows use of the powerful Genjutsu Tsukiyomi, the defensive ninjutsu Susanoo, and the offensive ninjutsu Amaterasu. Overuse will cause blindness. Naruto once again doubted he'd take that. Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. Requirements. Obtain the diamond, outdo your rival, medal. Take the Mangekyo Sharingan perk, chakra level 60, chakra control 60. No longer caused blindness from overuse. Naruto scratched his chin. That could be useful, but he had so much to get. He headed over to the stats page to start this grueling process. He noticed he had 45 points and quickly did the math. How do I have 45 points? He asked himself. He was 10 points too high. Every 10 levels, you get an addition 10 stat points to spend. Good job, kid. Whoever controlled the book was good at keeping Naruto informed. Naruto nodded at the book's helpfulness. So he had 45 points to use. He wanted to get the Hirishin Jutsu, and that was going to take quite a few points. He poured 10 points into the intelligence, getting that requirement. Congratulations. Perk unlocked. Naruto growled and checked which perk it was this time. Point bonus. Requirements. 40 intelligence. Doubles the points you receive per level for skill points or gives you an additional half the stat points per level. Naruto looked up to the ceiling. Praise the log, for the log is kind. He said and immediately selected the perk. It then asked which option he wanted, and he chose where he got the additional half the stats per level. Since he used 2 levels worth of stat points, he wouldn't get them. If he did his math right, that was an additional 12 points. Which put him back at 47 points. Since Naruto needed higher level of chakra control, he put 35 points into it, dropping him to 12 points left to work with. However, he also had the necessary control for even the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. He poured 10 into his endurance, giving him the necessary points for the Hirishin. He just left the other 2 points alone. Naruto then went to the skills page and glanced at it. By the holy log, that's a lot of points. He had 350 points he could spend. He looked at ceiling, with 10 points and poured the 90 needed points into it. Ceiling. Adept level. 100 PTS. You can now decipher complex seals and draw them. You can use your chakra as the medium. 30 points went into pickpocketing. Pickpocketing. Adept level. 100 PTS. You can now steal from an unaware cage level ninja. 40 points went into the stealth. Stealth. Adept level. 100 points. You can now hide from an unsuspecting cage. Helps all sneaky skills. 50 points went into the aura. Aura. Adept level. 100 points. Neutral kunoichi are willing to have with you. Careful, they might slit your throat. With 140 points left, Naruto looked through all the skills, curious as to what there was. He soon found the basic ninja skills and decided to level them up. Ninjutsu was at 40, so he gave the 10 rounding it out to 50. Ninjutsu. Apprentice level. 50 points. Ninjutsu are easier to learn. Current repertoire costs less chakra to cast. Naruto checked his taijutsu, which was a measly 15. He gave it 35 to put it at 50. Taijutsu. Apprentice level. 50 points. Taijutsu styles are easier to learn. In a fight you see more openings. Naruto then boosted his genjutsu, which was at 25 to 50. Genjutsu. Apprentice level. 50 points. You can now detect and dispel C-rank genjutsu. You can now cast D-rank genjutsu, including the standard clone technique. Naruto smacked his forehead seeing that. That was really not fair, that he was only now able to use that. Naruto checked a few others, soon finding one called Ninja Master, which was at 0. He decided to boost it to 50. Ninja Master. Apprentice level. 50 points. Gives a bonus to all ninja skills. Taijutsu, ninjutsu, sealing, genjutsu, kenjutsu, senjutsu, medical jutsu, projectile throwing, etc. Naruto gave a grin. He now had 20 points left to use. Naruto decided to throw them into medical jutsu. If he could save a life on the battlefield, then maybe what happened with Zabuza and Haku wouldn't happen again. Naruto was about to flip over to the perks when the top of the page flashed. Bonus from having with Mikoto. Ninjutsu, Genjutsu, Taijutsu, and Kenjutsu went up by the amount mentioned earlier. Naruto then flipped over to the perks and paused as he looked at the Sharingan. Did he want it? He had it unlocked and available. He rubbed his eyes thinking about it. He wouldn't abuse it. He'd only use it as an absolutely last resort. He selected it and got it, before also getting the Harem Master perk. Life was good for Naruto. Naruto walked towards training ground 44, a little ahead of his teammates as he did so. Something had been bugging him recently, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it. It was like someone was watching him, and despite his impressive sneaking skills, whoever it was, continued to follow him. It was irritating to no end. He briefly reflected upon the first exam. While he hadn't been able to figure out how to cheat without getting caught, he did figure out the purpose of the exam. At the end, again he figured out the purpose of the last question, and only did he help everyone out when Sakura had been about to give up. Other smaller details he noticed were more from a possible standpoint. The Oto Nin had eyed him like a piece of steak, a hopeful gleam in her eye before it was killed. Hinata had been blushing even more so than usual and fidgeting in her seat a bit. Naruto was able to notice she was rubbing her thighs together. Ino had taken one look at him and had a brief dusting of red across her face before she noticed Sasuke. He had his book out, briefly flipping through the pages. He checked a few things, noticing several of the girls taking the chunin exams were in his book. If he really wanted to, he could have a whole lot of fun. He stopped at a redhead girl with and tapped on the picture. Karin Uzumaki. Allegiance. Kusa. Rank. Genin. Naruto didn't pay much more attention past that. There was another Uzumaki here. A kin that was still alive. He would have to send his shadow clones out to find her. At the training ground, Naruto looked at the fence that had warnings plastered all over it as he put his book away. And we're going in there. He said more to himself than anything. All right then, brats, listen up. Anko called from atop the fence. Welcome to training ground 44, or as most shinobi like to call it, the Forest of Death. She yelled out. Here it is that you will be pitted against each other in order to get these 2 scrolls. She pulled the scrolls from a trench coat pocket and held them up for the genin to see. Naruto narrowed his eyes on the scrolls as he watched the special jonin return the scrolls to her pockets. So that's what he had been training for, to pickpocket those scrolls at the very least. Time to act the idiot. The forest doesn't look too tough, it will literally be a walk in the park. Naruto boasted. A kunai sliced through his cheek, fairly deeply. He felt an ample pair of press into his back, and by his humble opinion they felt like D-cups. He felt a tongue slide along his cheek. Such tasty blood, the brave ones are usually the first to die in my forest. Anko said in a sultry tone. Naruto slid his hands into Anko's trench coat and withdrew the 2 scrolls. As stealthy as he could, he slipped them into the pockets of his jumpsuit pants. I can't die yet, he said as he was doing this. I haven't become Hokage yet, he said, feeling Anko rub her more against his back. Hokage, huh? Anko asked. Well, Mr. Future Hokage-sama, you make it to the tower with time to spare and I'll give you a present. She then moved away and began to explain the rest of the exam. Get to the tower, 5 days, find your own food, water, etc. Naruto signed the release form and turned them in, getting a scroll in the process. He might give it away if he saw fit to do so. He already had his team's scrolls and hadn't been called out about it yet. Naruto went back over to his teammates and went with them to the starting gate. It wasn't long before they ran inside and leapt up into the trees where he stopped. Guys, he called out and motioned them over. What is it, Dobi? Sasuke asked. We need to get the scrolls as fast as we can. Sasuke-kun's right, Sakura said, tapping her foot impatiently. Naruto produced the 2 scrolls he picked off of Anko. As a shinobi, we kill, we lie, we cheat, and we steal. That is our job essentially. If we get to the tower fast enough and they pass us, at least you two will go on if they decide to disqualify me. Sasuke and Sakura stared dumbfounded. But, when she was rubbing on you. Sasuke said, piecing everything together. You got her to attack you. Yeah, that just about sums it up. Naruto said. She seemed like the impulsive type like me, I just had enough skills to pull that off. So let's get to the tower. Naruto put his hands together in a familiar cross-shaped hand sign before summoning up 90 shadow clones. 60 of them performed a transformation jutsu looking like Sakura and Sasuke before splitting up in groups of 3 in separate directions. Naruto discreetly passed off their heaven scroll to one of the clones before he went with the real Sasuke and Sakura straight for the tower with all haste. Little did he know that he had just unknowingly thwarted a snake Sanin's plans and made a very pissed off enemy. One group of clones veered off, blindly moving about as they hopped from tree to tree. The Naruto-looking clone paused as they ran, he thought he had heard someone screaming. That sound was followed by the sound of a bear growling or roaring. He rushed over, his partners following him, passing by 2 mauled Kusa-genin to see the Karin girl about to be mauled by a bear. As one, he and the other 2 threw as many kunai and shuriken as they could into the bear, quickly making it fall down dead from the many sharp and pointy objects sticking out of its back. The Sasuke and Sakura disguised clones dispelled before Naruto leapt down, glancing around. Naruto began to walk towards Karin when she spotted him. She got up and tackled him, nuzzling into his chest, surprising Naruto before she started to kiss him, muttering thank you over and over in between the kisses. Karin pulled back from mauling her savior's face with her lips to glance him over. Cammy, she was hot and bothered, and just being closer to the blonde was affecting her even more. Her thighs rubbed together, trying to quell some of the fire. One leg slipped between his, and pressed up against his groin as she began to kiss him again. She paused just before her lips met his. My name is Karin, she said. Naruto Uzumaki, he said and bit her lower lip, on it some before he pressed his lips against her own. He wasn't sure why she was acting like this, he didn't think his aura was so high that women would throw themselves at him. What he didn't know was that with Karin being a sensor type of shinobi, she was affected more by the aura skill. Karin put her hands on the Naruto's shoulders before jumping a bit and wrapping her legs around his waist. She ran her hands up into his hair, grabbing it tight as she felt his hands on her thighs and her. She felt his tongue slip against her lips and eagerly parted her lips to accept the offering. She fought his tongue with hers for a little bit until she pulled back and leaned down to the blonde's ear. I need you, she whispered, running her tongue along the edge of his earlobe. I want to on your balls while I pump you length until you spew cum all over my face and glasses. She said. Cammy, she didn't know what came over her, but she needed to have this blonde every which way she could. Naruto in his breath threw his teeth at her words. I'm just a clone of the original, so I can only give 2 maybe 3 loads before I go pop. He said. Karin pouted, but then she thought about it. There was only one clone technique known to make solid clones, and if the clone could have twice, maybe 3 times, she gave a bit of a predatory smirk. That's fine, Naruto-kun. The original you will rock my world, right? She asked, undoing the orange jacket as she lowered herself to the ground. The clone.